Today, we're diving into the story of a single farm in South Africa that found itself right in the middle of a national firestorm. And believe me, this isn't just about farming. It's this incredible, volatile mix of politics, history, and the law, all crashing together on one single piece of land.
Just listen to that quote. It's from a member of Parliament, Juliet Basson, who was actually there for what was supposed to be just a routine government visit. As she says, things got not normal very, very fast. So what on earth happened that day?
Well, the whole controversy really blew up with this chaotic, unannounced visit from a government committee. But what actually went down? Turns out the answer completely depends on who you ask. We've got two wildly different stories here.
And when I say different, I mean they could not be further apart. On one hand, you have the Department of Labor's official story. It was a standard visit, and they met with some muted resistance. But then you have the farm's CEO, Hoatson, and his account is like something out of a movie. He described a hostile takeover. We're talking about 50 unidentified people, heavily armed police, forcing their way in, throwing around verbal abuse and even racist remarks. And for what? He said it was all just for social media likes. There is zero common ground between these two versions of events.
This is where having an insider's view from MP Juliet Basson is just so crucial. She revealed that this entire raid, this whole massive operation, was kicked off by a single, unverified claim that the farm hits people with a sjambok. That's a type of whip. And on the ground, she said security was just overrun and threatened with arrest. Critical biosecurity protocols for things like foot and mouth disease were completely ignored. And get this, the excuse for shutting down the entire factory was a single employee not wearing a dust mask correctly. A single dust mask. She said the whole thing was so absurd and embarrassing, she personally apologized to the farm afterward. So all of this just begs the question, right? What kind of company gets caught up in a storm like this? Are we talking about some shady rogue operator here, or is there something much bigger going on? Let's take a proper look at Nomandien Farms.
You know, you might think this is some tiny little operation, but you'd be wrong. Way wrong. It turns out Nomandien Farms is a huge player in its region, a real pillar of the local economy. To really get the picture, you have to understand the scale here. Normandien is one of the biggest employers in its district, with up to 3,000 employees. And they're not just a farm, they're into forestry, logistics, and you might have even heard of one of their brands, Thirsty Bottled Water. This whole operation is part of the much larger Tequani Group, which is a major agro-industrial business in South Africa.
Unlock, this isn't some fly-by-night operation we're talking about. The company has major certifications from the Forestry Stewardship Council, the South African Bureau of Standards, and a bunch of others. These are serious credentials. It shows they're a highly regulated business and they're playing by both national and international rules.
And their whole mission, their corporate motto, is building for the next generation. They talk all about wanting to benefit communities and create jobs. It's an image that just could not be more different from the chaos and hostility of that government visit.
But here's where the story gets even crazier. As we dig a little deeper, it becomes crystal clear that this dramatic raid, it wasn't a one-off thing. Oh no, it was just the loudest explosion in a series of long, grinding battles this farm has been fighting for years and on multiple fronts.
So let's talk about the first battleground, the land itself. This is a deeply, deeply complex fight. It involves land rights, conservation law, and the entire legacy of South Africa's history. And this wasn't just some local disagreement either. This conflict was so serious it went all the way up to South Africa's Supreme Court of Appeal. And at its heart was a really fundamental question about land, legacy, and livestock.
Okay, so here's the breakdown. Normandien wanted to remove a bunch of livestock because the animals were causing severe overgrazing and degrading the land. But the people who own the livestock argued they had rights as labor tenants. That's a special legal status in South Africa for people who have historically lived and worked on land in exchange for being able to use it. So the court had to decide, what comes first, historical rights or environmental protection? And the ruling was crystal clear. It said that conservation laws apply to everyone, and that stopping environmental damage by removing livestock is not the same thing as an eviction.
You'd think that would be enough drama for one company, right? A huge fight over land use going to the Supreme Court? Nope. At the same time, Nomandien was fighting another massive legal battle, this time over what lies underneath the ground.
This was an absolute legal roller coaster that went on for years. An oil and gas company, Rhino Oil and Gas, wanted to explore on Normandien's land. So Normandien fought them.
They actually won in the High Court, but then they lost that ruling in the Supreme Court. So they took the fight to the highest court in the land, the Constitutional Court. And then, just before a final judgment could be made, the oil and gas company just pulled out. They withdrew their application. So it was a victory for the farm in the end, but only after years and years of intense legal fighting.
Okay, let's just step back for a second. We've got this hostile political visit, a massive Supreme Court battle over land degradation, and a constitutional court case over resource exploration. What are we really looking at here when you connect all these dots?
When you zoom out, the story of Normandien Farms stops being about just one company. It starts to look like a perfect case study, a microcosm of all the immense overlapping pressures that land and business are facing in modern South Africa.
What we're really seeing is a perfect storm. You've got this intense political pressure, and that's crashing into the unresolved, complicated legacy of land reform. Then you have the big push for resource extraction, and that's clashing head-on with the legal duty to protect the environment. And on top of it all, there's the constant real-world risk of agricultural diseases. All these incredibly powerful forces are all converging right here on this one single farm.
So, the case of Nomandien Farms leaves us with this huge, critical question. Here's a business that employs thousands of people and is trying to operate in the modern world, but it's sitting on land that is just steeped in history and is now a target for politics. So, when the demands of modern business, the ghosts of history, and the full force of politics all collide on one piece of ground, what is the path forward? How is it even possible to build a future that is sustainable, fair, and productive for everyone involved?